I think the Mac Mini is an easy W, an easy yes for a lot of people. YouTube, yesterday Apple just released the brand new M2 and M2 Pro version of the Mac Mini, which is just arguably the best bargain in the Apple desktop computing world. But I did get a comment from someone questioning and saying that they felt that the $1299 asking price of the M2 Pro version of the Mac Mini was a bit steep in their opinion. So I decided today, let's pull up all of the tiers that match up with the M2 Pro Mac Mini, which there isn't much of them. Let's do a comparison. Let's look at the prices, the configurations, the possibilities. This is like somewhat of a realistic buyer's guide based purely off of experience with these M1 and M2 architecture machines. I have an M2 MacBook Air. I have a ton of M1 experience and use cases and devices. So let's get into it. Now, the Mac Mini, the beautiful thing, the aha moment of this Mac Mini, if you just go with the M2 base, is it starts at $599 to get in. That's wonderful. That's beautiful, especially in Apple terms. Y'all know Apple be asking the bag when it comes to their products. So if you're trying to get an Apple desktop computer and you already have a monitor, and if you don't, we'll talk about some options and so forth. But if you already have a monitor and you're looking for a good bargain, the M2 Mac Mini is a W. Now let's get into the M2 Pro Mac Mini first, and then we'll break down the M2 Mini. So if I pull up this comparison sector right here, and I have the tiers that align with the M2 Pro, we have the Mac Mini M2 Pro, and then we have the Mac Studio, which only starts at the M1 Max, but it's the comparable desktop solution in comparison to the Mac Mini that some people could be shopping, because depending on how you configure the M2 Pro, it gets into Mac Studio territory. And then we have the MacBook Pro 14-inch. Now, when we look at the comparison from like just the constructural build and the setup, you know, core counts and all that, these are always showing you the highest and the up to. So this page is kind of irrelevant as a comparison standpoint between these machines. What we have to do is go into each individual one and make changes there. So I go into the Mac Mini setup. This is the M2 Pro config, as you guys can see. So you basically are getting the 10-core CPU, 16-core GPU, and then 16 gigs, unified memory, 512 SSD, gigabit Ethernet. Now, if you go into the 14-inch M2 Pro, 10-core, 16-core, same chip, same unified memory, same storage. Now, if you go to the Mac Studio, at its base configuration, we're talking 10-core CPU, 24-core GPU. So we're getting a lot more power in the GPU perspective, you know, video editing, photo processing, and things like that right off the bat. 32 gigabytes, higher unified memory, W, and the same storage. This starts at the same price point as the 14-inch base model M2 Pro at $1,999. If we go into the Mac Mini M2 Pro, and if this in its base configuration is perfect for you, then you're winning from the perspective of the price point. Obviously, we're talking about a $700 price difference. But the second you start to make upgrades, it gets a bit complicated. So let's think about it like this. Do you have a display, right? And if you don't have a display, what display are you going to want to get? Is it going to be budget, mid-tier, or are you going to go for Apple's own Studio Display, which is on the pricier side? Also, here's my thing. Let's talk about RAM really quick from a realistic point of view. None of the cap reviews and scripts that you guys hear. If you don't know if you need more RAM, then you possibly don't need more RAM. Now, if you're very just clueless and you could have tasks and performances that require more, you know, oblivious, and you're like, hey, I want to get into this high-end 4K video editing and so forth. Here's the reality. These are the reason why these Pro machines start off with 16 gigabytes of unified memory, because that's the standard. That's like the ideal standard. People build gaming PCs off of 16 gigs of RAM and so forth. It's like the safe space. So 16 gigs for the majority of people is going to be ideal and okay. Now, the people who know that they require more RAM and so forth, they're going to grab the 32 gigs. If they know, like, because they're going to know they need it and they're going to be willing to pay the price point on that. Same thing goes on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, but we're talking about an extra $400 if I make that upgrade. Now, in the Mac Studio case, you don't have to make that upgrade because it's already in the base pricing, which is wonderful. And it doesn't have a display, which is why that pricing can be like that. Now, when you get into the M2 Pro Mac Mini, the next level is storage. Now, I'm one of the people, I believe in external storage, fast external storage, and saving money 100%. So if that's the route that you're gonna go and there's no request or you don't need that convenience of more internal storage, then by all means do that. But a lot of people kind of sell it a little bit more than what it's really like worth per se, because you got to think about it. 512 gigabytes of SSD storage, you have to be very conservative in your internal storage use case, like period, because it's easy to run up 512 gigabytes in today's terms because, you know, say you offloading photos or you saving video, you know, and so forth, and you putting those things on your internal storage and you don't have, which I highly recommend everyone has, like a good external, you know, it's the slow external storage that you can just offload large files onto and just have as a safe keep. But generally speaking, 512 gigabytes SSD storage, depending on your use case, may be enough. But in my opinion, from what I've seen for my personal use case, I can run that up quite quickly, even if I'm just offloading to external. So it just depends, like, wholeheartedly on what you keep on your internal. So you have to be very conscious. But 512 is a way better starting point than what used to be with the 256 and so forth, which might be on the regular M2. We'll check that out later and talk about that. So keep in mind on storage. Me personally, 1 terabyte is my minimum comfort level. And that's not even enough for me personally because I love using the internal SSD storage for editing. I use Final Cut Pro. I do a lot of high-end projects, and sometimes those projects are enormous. Like, I had a recent project go into like the 800 gig, and I have a 1 terabyte on my M1 Max, and I was maxing out internal storage. I was like this close to not being able to finish that because I didn't have enough storage. So for me, like 1 terabyte is the minimum for me because I have a different use case. But if you look at the spectrum, like say with the 14, say I realize, okay, 16 gigs is all I need. Let's kick it there because a $400 increase, like I said before, you're gonna know if you need it. But I wanna go to the 1 terabyte, right? Look at that. So we got $21.99 on the 14 inch, and then we're at $14.99. This is a nice sweet spot right here with the M2 Pro, you know, Mac Mini. Now, there was a point where the M1 Pro, MacBook Pros were just at this price right here. But that's with the, you know, not as much storage, but still you'll get the display and so forth. Again, it's all about your use cases. If you're gonna be setting this up as a desktop only machine and, you know, you're just gonna use it as your at-home power beast in a small package, the M2 Pro Mac Mini is going to serve you extremely well. So $14.99 for a M2 Pro, like a pro level machine. The small compact has all of the ports that you can use. That's another key thing about this. You're getting 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, 2 USB A's. You got the gigabit, you got an HDMI out, headphone out, great IO, all at a great price point. Again, these are just the upgrades and me just dancing around and just seeing. But I look at that $14.99 price point, and let's just say, hey, I'm finna be doing some more heavier weightlifting with my setup. I'm looking at the Mac Studio. The worst thing about the Mac Studio at its base price point is that it only comes with 512 gigabyte SSD. And I think this is by design because if I'm buying a Mac Studio, you know what I mean, and one Mac setup, I'm more than likely going to be dealing with projects that are going to require more than that type of internal. Like me, real talk, ideally I would love the 4 terabyte, but look at what that puts me at. 2 terabyte would be sweet, but that's $25.99. You see, it's easy in the ladder system that Apple has in place to just end up like going above and beyond, especially if you don't need it, it's a bad decision. So you have to be very conscious about exactly what you need. Now, the Studio Display, I'm using the Studio Display right now. I absolutely love this thing. It's ideal for color grading and the color accuracy that we know and love Apple for in the displays. No, it's not the best. And yes, there may be better quote unquote deals out there, but if you are comfortable in the Apple ecosystem and you like building out your Apple products together because of the seamlessness and the way that they work together, this is ideal. But the price points can get hefty. Like if I do standard glass and I just do the typical stand, then we're only at $15.99, which is sweet. I mean, granted, I know I just said it was sweet. You guys think it's overpriced. Okay, fair. Whatever you feel. But for this display, for like me, as someone who relies on color accuracy and I'm color grading video and photos all the time, this is clutch right here. Let's say I don't want to do all that, but I want that color accuracy and a great display from Apple. 14-inch MacBook Pro, M2 Pro comes in clutch because I could get all of that Say if I only need the base storage at $199, even if I do 1 terabyte, it's only $200 more, $21.99. That's cheaper than me having a more like built M2 Pro Mac Mini with a studio display. But the other plus side and the beautiful thing about the M2 Pro Mac Mini is when we get into the specs, hold on, let me go here. And if we go down to the technical specs around displays, man, you can do 3 displays, 2 6K 60 hertz and 1 4K resolution at 60 hertz via HDMI. Or you could do 2 displays, one up to 6K 60 hertz over Thunderbolt and 1 display over 4K resolution on the HDMI at 144 hertz, so get a faster refresh rate. Or you could do the 1 display at up to 8K 60 or 4K 240 hertz over the HDMI, because this has a new and improved HDMI out. M2 Pro gives you a lot of options, man, when it comes to like your displays and your setup. Now, let's talk about the M2 Mac Mini, because starting off at $599, base model. I grabbed one of these. We're going to talk about it. The base model is cool, especially if you're just looking to like kind of like set this up in a cut. This is just a casual machine. This is perfect. It's very minimal, doesn't take up a lot of space, and it's powerful because it has the M2 in it. I'm telling you, Apple changed the game with this new architecture. So if I'm going to use this lightweight and casually, the 256 SSD, I could get by 8 gigabytes of unified memory because it's just being casual. We chilling. And $599. W. Still, bravo. Shout out to Apple for this price point. This is nuts. Say I want to use this. I want to be a content creator in the beginning. I want a little and I upgrade my 16 gigabytes of RAM to help me with those extensive tasks. I keep the 256 SSD because I'm going to use external, cheaper storage, because obviously if I'm on the M2 Mini level, I'm trying to make my money work the right way. So $799 right there. I get an external display at a budget or a mid-tier, whatever I have or already have one. That's not a bad price point. So the M2 Mini, by far, especially in base configuration, if that's all you need, $599 is stellar. And you can upgrade the RAM. And even if I upgrade the storage right there, then I'm at that $999 price point. At that point, I would probably want to, if I could, spring a little bit more for the M2 Pro. I'm just saying, if like my use cases were going to be a little bit more like labor intensive, but if I was just sitting here chilling and at the base model, I mean, who can argue with $599? You get in the Apple ecosystem, you get all of the benefits of it, and you have an extremely powerful machine. Powerful. The M2 chip is powerful, as was the M1. So, and it's better and more efficient. So, gotta love this. Gotta love the M2 and what it's looking like for this generation of Mac Minis. I think the Mac Mini is an easy W, an easy yes for a lot of people. That's why I'm going to be covering a lot of Mac Mini content. I got you guys. My name is CJ. This is CJ Knows Tech. You guys already know what to do. Smash that subscribe button and go crazy on the like button.